it's possible and it must be embraced in our society that a father can take the lead on caregiving and can be a beautiful and talented caregiver. And I'm just going to summarize that very shortly in one more sentence, that it's possible to be a man and to be a caregiver.
I am very appreciative to have John Adams as guest number 7 on the It's Possible series in conjunction with Canada's Career Month. John is the blogger of Dad Blog UK, a official LinkedIn changemaker focused on flexible work, a journalist, a book author, and as he will be sharing, he is going into education. And today we will be talking about the aspects of lifelong learning, why caregiving can be done by everybody, regardless of gender, and much more. I'm super excited to have John on the show today. Hello, John. Welcome to the It's Possible show.
Hi, Karen. Thanks for having me on. It's possible.
It is so nice to see you again, all the way from the UK, and I am delighted to have global guests on the show for the Career Month here in Canada to have many people learn about best practices from all over the world.
Well, you're right. The best practice comes from all over the world, so it's great to be a part of this. And what can I say? Like all right-thinking people, I'm a huge fan of Canada. So,
Thank you so much. And so now there might be people who are listening to us right now live or watching the replay or later when we will have the podcast episode up who might not know you yet. So I've asked my guests to introduce themselves in the working out loud methods by introducing themselves with 5 facts. So could you do that, please?
certainly. Okay, so 5 facts. Well, I'm a dad of 2 girls, Helen, who's almost 13, and 9-year-old Izzy. I'm married to Jill. She is the main financial provider for the family because, fact 2, for the past decade, I've been the children's main carer, and I've also had a side hustle, basically as a blogger and content creator, primarily at my blog, dadbloguk.com, where I write about family life, parenting, and being the main carer for my kids. I just have to casually mention that it is the UK's #1 fatherhood blog and has been named so for the past 4 years running. And I'm sure we're going to get onto this, but I have also just returned to higher education, so I'm a busy person. So 3, I was an extra in the film The Madness of King George. Fact 4, I have just been released from 10 days of isolation, as I'm afraid I did develop the dreaded COVID-19. As a blogger, I have interviewed Hollywood A-listers, including Paul Rudd, Michael Douglas, and Steve Carell. I could probably think of a few others with a bit more time. And bonus question I was asked to do, something Canada related. So many years ago, I was actually a travel journalist. And I was on the first ever flight, a Virgin Atlantic flight that flew from London Gatwick to Toronto. Now, I didn't realize quite how big this news was till I started talking to a Canadian friend of mine who told me that British Airways and Air Canada dominated the London-Toronto route. So the fact Virgin Atlantic had opened this up was quite big news in Canada, so I'm told. Unfortunately, September the 11th brought an end to that route, but I was on the first flight anyway. So there you go.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself. And it is so interesting to learn new facts about you. And, thank you for talking already about the fact that you have been the main carer for your children for many years. And what I'm curious about is, especially as we have young professionals and recent graduates listening to us. So, when you first thought about your career, how did you think about potential caregiving in the future and your role with that?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And the honest answer is I didn't really think about it a great deal. I simply felt that I would go into the world of work, and just probably at some point fall into the usual dad's goes to work and works, and mum stays behind and does most of the family stuff. Now, I think I always knew that I was going to be a reasonably, involved and hands-on father. I think I would have considered any other approach to be a dereliction of duty, to be honest with you. But I can't say I'd given it a huge amount of thought. And as it happens, as as the way the world goes, Karen, I got married, and then a year later, basically got separated and divorced. So that didn't quite go as planned. With my second wife, with Mrs. Adams, who I'm very delighted to say I'm still married to, I have to say, and may that's may it last this time. We had kids. Um, and again, we didn't have that much discussion about it, but that was really because, and this is an issue I think is particularly prevalent in Canada, where I think in the UK property prices are astronomical. But I think in Canada, from my understanding of talking to Canadians I know, in Canada, you've got a real problem with property prices. Um, and my wife and I don't think we didn't really talk about it a great deal, because we just both thought that we had to work full time to pay the mortgage. Now, a comment that I would make is that my wife, she just is not the sort of person who is ever, EVER capital letters, right? She is never ever going to bake cakes for the Parent Teacher Association. Okay. Caregiving is forced upon women. And there's a really, really interesting report that's produced every couple of years. It's called the State of the World's Fathers Report, and it's produced by a charity called Promundo and Mencare. And the 2015 report concluded by saying that men and women are as genetically hardwired to be caregivers as each other, but that men do not have the opportunities to be caregivers. So, as I say, it's a really good report that just looks at the state of fatherhood at a particularly point in time. So, anyway, my Mrs. Adams, as I tend to call her publicly, and I, we had our first child, Helen. She was in full-time childcare my wife had a period of maternity leave. She then went back to work full time. So she was in full time childcare for about a year. So we're talking about 18 months old by this point. And we discovered she was actually the only child in full time childcare at that particular nursery or kindergarten, as you probably call it. Kindergarten in Canada or nursery?
I think it's preschool.
Preschool. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll call it preschool. And we weren't particularly happy with this. So I wasn't hugely happy in my job at the time. So I suggested leaving my job and taking on a role, sort of concentrating on family and home. Now, my wife wasn't entirely happy with this about this at first, but she came around to the idea. And actually, at first, I took on a part-time job and combined that with being Helen's main care and concentrating on the home. And over the years, things have fluctuated a bit. Sometimes I've worked part-time, sometimes I've not worked at all. Sometimes I've made money, through my blogging and content creation. But this approach has worked really well for us. My wife has been able to concentrate on her career. I've concentrated largely on family and home with my side hustle, blogging, content creating. And the kids, because we subsequently had another daughter, the kids have had one of us concentrating on their care. Every family, I have to stress this, is different. You could be a military family. It could be that, dad or mum, whoever, is away doing tours of duty for 6 months at a time. It may be that someone works in law enforcement and does shift work, which actually shift work can give you greater flexibility. I'm just very, very big on stressing that, because for some families, the traditional dad goes out to work, mum stays at home, will work perfectly for them. But it is a case of having that freedom removing those barriers to allow people from both genders to be able to fulfill the caregiving role or the main breadwinning role, whichever works for them. And we're not in that place yet.
Thank you so much for sharing your own experience. Now, you've already said we are not there yet, that it is really, an equal of who can decide or who decides to go to the paid work, if that's something a couple were to decide. But now, for somebody who is a young professional, based on your own experience, what kind of advice or tip would you give them if they're, say, pre-family?
Pre-family. Okay, I've got 2 or 3. Do you want me to select one, or do you want me to go through what I've got?
Go ahead, go through
Okay.
all of them. Yes, because I'm very curious to hear.
Okay. Stop me when I say too much. I am just going to have a quick glass of a mouthful of water. That's okay.
And thank you so much, John, that you're willing to come onto the show despite the fact that you just had COVID. I really, really appreciate that.
Oh, it's okay. You can't let COVID beat you, I'm afraid. And anyone who has got COVID at the minute, best of luck and get well soon, is what I'd say. And just remember, wear a mask and get vaccinated. Anyway, right. So, advice for young professionals. Well, look at the parental benefits that are available to you. Government benefits, I know in the UK, and I know in Canada. I know they're done by province and territory in Canada. There are some differences there, but do check what the government parental leave benefits are, and also with your employer, check where your parental leave benefits are. We are sort of moving in a direction whereby a lot of employers now are sort of equalizing things, but that's not always the case. You will still find with some employers, that they are paying enhanced benefits to mothers still, which is very interesting, because of course the one thing I haven't even mentioned yet, which is a big oversight on my behalf, so I do apologize, is same-sex couples.
Yes.
We must always consider the same-sex couples and how they will balance things, because not every family, of course, is mum and dad, and of course you have single parents as well, adoptive parents, foster parents, and we must always think about all the different families that are out there. But anyway, getting back to the question, look at your maternity and paternity benefits, because that may have an influence on the childcare decisions that you make. Take a long, hard look at the informal support networks that you have around you. Now, my wife and I live a good 100 miles away from my family. My wife is 400 miles away from her family. We have had no family around us, and that is, I've found, actually, with hindsight, very difficult. If you are able to rely on informal support like that, that's marvelous. I would also say, what opportunities do you have to work flexibly or work from home? Now, yes, there are those opportunities, possibly in manufacturing or heavy industry, where you have got to be in your workplace to work. However, during the COVID pandemic, we've seen that there's a lot more flexibility out there than we actually realize. In fact, I've got a good friend who works in law enforcement. Now, you'd imagine law enforcement, you would have to be at your place of work. Actually, he didn't have to be. So look at the flexibility that your job offers. Now, unless, as I say, you're in one of those heavy industry roles or something, if you have no opportunity to work flexibly, if you have no opportunity to work remotely, change job. Seriously, give it in and change job. This is a 21st century. We're not in the post-COVID era. COVID is still out there, but we're well down the track now. Employers who want to attract the best talent, they've simply got to be flexible. GOT. No arguments there. Within heterosexual couples, do not simply assume that mum is going to be or got to be the default caregiver. Why shouldn't it be dad? if that works better for that family, or indeed can you share the role between you if that actually is better for you. So there are a few sort of tips and ideas for younger people. Actually, I will just add one. If you are going to be the main caregiver for your children, be you female or male, I'm quite often asked, sort of from the perspective as a stay-at-home dad, what would you tell people? And I always feel the answer I'm supposed to give is something about changing nappies or something like that. That's really boring advice. Okay, there are so many books, there are so many YouTube videos, there are so many bloggers. I should know, I am one, who write about that stuff all the time. What you actually need to do is you need to think about what is going to happen 3, 5, 7, 10, 15 years afterwards, when your children are, when you've got an empty nest basically, or when they are in secondary school, high school, and you can potentially work again. Do you need to retrain? Will you need to keep various skills up to speed? And crucially, what's going to happen to your pension? You do need to think about pension. So the top thing I always say, if you're going to be the main caregiver, is pension, pension, pension.
Thank you so much, John. I think this is so important to look at many different aspects of, as you described, not just the first couple of months or years of being a caregiver, but further down the line. And now you've already mentioned the aspect of flexible work. And for people who might not know this, you are part of the official change makers LinkedIn in the UK, and on the aspect of the flexible work. And I'm curious, why do you feel so passionate about that topic?
Yes. Okay. Good question. Can I just ask, do you have change makers in Canada yet? I can't remember if it's been launched there yet.
No, to be very honest, I've seen it in the UK and I have seen it in Germany, but
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any other country. So I wonder if will be rolled out. Mhm.
Yes, I believe it is being rolled out, and I think Germany was actually, if I'm right on this, I think it was actually the second nation that Changemakers was rolled out to. So, yes, so I've campaigned with LinkedIn to increase acceptance of flexible working and remote working, and also availability of flexible working. The crucial point there is actually making it more acceptable. Now, just to take a step back, flexible working is often portrayed as a woman's issue. Now, if we treat flexible working as a woman's issue, the onus is always going to be on female employees to work flexibly. What we need is men to be speaking up about flexible working. So I was delighted when LinkedIn asked me to work on its Changemakers campaign, or should I say, its high-profile, multi-award-winning Changemakers campaign, because it's honestly that LinkedIn has, and its PR company, Brands to Life, they've won so many awards for Changemakers. It's been amazing. 1 second, sorry. That's COVID for you. Anyway, why am I passionate about it? I basically left full-time employment because I couldn't get the flexibility that I felt I needed to be the father I should or could be to my children. Now, I'm Generation X, and I stood out for taking that approach. Now, younger men take this to a whole new level. There's a fatherhood organization in the UK called Daddy Life. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, Daddy Life produced a very interesting report called the Millennial Dad at Work report. And what Daddy Life discovered was that a year after becoming a father, a third of all fathers that took part in this research project had changed jobs because they couldn't get the flexibility that they wanted.
Wow.
A further third were actively looking to change jobs. So it's not a woman's issue. I mean, actually, I know that HR professionals are one of the audiences for this, and recruitment teams and so on. Men may actually be. It's not particularly fashionable always for men to pipe up and express concerns about this. And all the research shows that men are actually quite scared to ask for flexible working. Actually, a man's request of flexible working, according to research I've seen in the UK and Australia, is twice as likely to be turned down as a woman's. And yet here we have research showing that millennial men, they're much more likely to do what I did and walk, and they'll take their talent and their skills with them. And that's a message that employers need to hear and to heed. And as a society, we need to think differently and appreciate that flexible working is not just a woman's issue. And that's not to say that let's not overlook the fact that women very often are treated appallingly when they become mothers, and women do have challenges working flexibly and balancing things, because they do. But we mustn't overlook the fact that actually this is a huge issue for men. So so I was really delighted when LinkedIn asked me to get involved in that campaign.
Thank you so much, John, because I feel it is still often so, rare in different countries that men speak up about flexible work. So every time I, read something from you and you talk about flexible work, it makes me feel very happy, because I feel the more role models there exist, the more it's simply written about, awareness is being raised, and people start thinking, yeah, why not? So I am very appreciative.
No, that's great, and I like to raise awareness of it. And like I said, I think LinkedIn took a bit of a risk by actually asking me to sort of talk about flexible working, because the easy option would have been to have got a high profile motherhood campaigner to do it, but no, they went with me. So I'm really appreciative of LinkedIn for doing that.
Yeah. And now you have talked earlier about, different aspects in one's life, lifelong learning. And what I'm very curious about is asking my guests about transferable skills from different areas, or what I call them life modules. So I would love to ask you, what if you reflect back on your career, including your unpaid care work, what kind of transferable skills do you feel you have learned from it?
Okay, well, from care work, I would say I have learned, and I don't mean to make it. I mean, this could sound like a joke. It's not meant to be. It really isn't. Negotiation skills, because I mean, anyone who's ever tried to negotiate anything with a child, especially a young child, it's tougher than dealing with most adults. In all seriousness. So I think anyone, but you haven't necessarily got to be the main caregiver to a child, but anyone who's got experience with dealing with children, you're going to get good negotiation skills. Communication skills are important. That's not necessarily just because you're dealing with children. If you think about all the people that you deal with, all the different healthcare workers, educationalists, other family members, all of them need dealing with it in a different way. So communication skills, timekeeping is another one. Although I'm pretty sure most parents will admit that actually timekeeping can be a bit all over the place. I think crucial skills actually, flexibility and adaptability, because you've only got to have a child wake up in the morning ill and unable to go to school, and you suddenly, your plans for the day, you've got to completely rework them. You, especially I think as children get older, you have to be a really good listener, because they are going to they're going to come across challenges and things that you're going to have to help them with. Research skills, I think, is another one. Obviously, I'm sort of harking back to my journalism days there, but you do have to research all sorts of things, be it childcare facilities, schools, where you're going to live, if you're ever sort of looking to move house. And yes, thinking about my recent experiences, I think, COVID-19 has been on the news so much for the past 18 months. But it isn't until you and your family all get it that you really become an expert on dealing with bloody COVID-19. So yes, so there are all sorts of things that I think you do. I mean, I think another point I would make is this is maybe not completely relevant to your question, but I'd say that something I have come to appreciate, and something that is that education and skills development is lifelong. I think we all go through the school system, and those of us, such as myself, who are fortunate enough to have gone through the higher education system. And then it's almost sort of like education ends there. Fine, you may do training courses at work, but for the majority of us, we don't really carry on. And what I've found after sort of a decade of being the main carer for my kids is various opportunities are open to me, and various opportunities that I may possibly follow up, sort of career-wise, once my youngest daughter is at school. But I have actually returned to higher education myself in recent months. I did a different qualification when I was in my early 20s, a higher national diploma, a journalism qualification that wasn't quite at degree level. So I'm now effectively topping that up now with and studying for a bachelor's degree now that I would hope I've just got about another year's worth of study. Fingers crossed, I shall then actually have that, and I'll look into. I'm not too sure exactly. Well, I know what I want to do, but I'm going to go into education in some way. That's my plan. So yes, education is a lifelong thing, and we should be thinking about this. I'll just expand on that very quickly in that I used to work for an organization called the Pension Protection Fund in the UK, which, oh gosh, I'll be here all night if I tell you what it does, but it basically pays compensation to people if a pension scheme fails. And we worked a lot with actuaries. And the one thing that actuaries have consistently done since the dawn of time is underestimate how long you're going to live. Now, when I was in my 30s, actuaries were estimating that someone in your 30s would live until they were about 100 years of age. So how long someone like myself will actually live, who knows? But we've got to prepare and think differently about having 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 careers during our life, because the traditional retirement age is 65. That's like a third of your working life. By the time you maybe finish higher education to 65, that's about a third of your life. And government pension schemes just cannot support that. Full stop. End of the matter. No matter what they do. So we've all got to prepare to work much longer. But listen, I've gone well off topic, Karen. I've gone well off topic. I should stop talking.
Well, John, what is so important, or what you just said, is that, anybody who is listening, who is at the beginning of their career, I feel more and more, as you have also said, it's lifelong learning. It's no longer a typical, moving up the ladder within maybe one industry, but there will be so many different aspects to one's career. And I think what you just shared about your own career aspiration, I think, is awesome, because it really demonstrates to people listening to us, one can always change. And it's, you might not have initially, when you were doing your journalism course, ever thought that one day you would be where you are today, thinking about getting into education.
I'd have run a mile. I would never have considered it.
But and I think this is so important as well, that at the beginning of one's career, I mean, there are some people who might be very focused and specializing, whether that is law or a medical profession. But then there are many people who are more on a generalist type career path, and I think that is important to realize that both ways are perfectly fine, and it isn't
something that everybody at age, say, 20 needs to know for the rest of their life where they're going. And so I'm super appreciative for you to share, your own career path.
Well, thank you, Karin. Yes, good luck to the 20-year-old who does know exactly where they want to be. Because at that age, I wanted to be a journalist, which I did. Sorry, but yes, we've all got to prepare. Things are going to change. I never thought I'd end up being the main carer for my kids for more than a decade, but I have been. So you have got to be. It's going back to the question you asked. Got to be flexible and adaptable.
Yeah. And I know, I want to be, appreciative that you are talking to me despite coming to the end of your COVID time. So I don't want to, make it super long, our conversation. Also, I would love to talk with you more. So what I would like to make sure is, like, if you look at the pandemic, do you feel like has it helped or hindered, like, focus on flexible work or, unpaid care work? What is your view, and where do you hope we will be in maybe 5 or 10 years?
Okay, where I hope we would be in 5 or 10 years is an acceptance that remote working is just standard practice. And what we also need to do is we need to get away from the idea that remote working means working from home. Okay. Remote working, it should free you up so that you can go to your child's nativity play at school. You could have caring responsibilities for your older parents who live 150 miles away. It could mean that 2 days a week you work from their house. You maybe work from your office for 2 days a week and you work from home for 1 day a week. It could be, if you are young, free and single and you have not got childcare responsibilities, it could be that you are what's the beach in Wreck Beach, isn't it, in Vancouver? Yeah, would you work from Wreck Beach? I'm trying to think now. It's been a long time since I've been there. Okay, maybe you're watching from Wreck Beach as the sun is setting. So anyway, I want remote working to just become standard practice as far as possible, but the pandemic has been a huge help. We've seen that flexible working can work. Now, my brother made a very interesting observation. When we entered in the UK, we entered our first hard lockdown on March the 23rd, 2020. Now, my brother-in-law said to me, imagine if you told your IT team that on March the 23rd, everyone in your organization would have to work from home. They would simply tell you that it couldn't be done. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry to have to, I don't mean to criticize IT teams, but I'm sure we've all had enough experience to know that, that would almost certainly have been the response. When forced to by government, oddly, it worked. And I mean, speaking for myself, I think there were a couple of weeks where things were a bit shaky. You never quite knew if you're going to be able to get hold of someone or not. But after that initial 2 weeks, everything seemed to work. And what we had at that particular point in time was pandemic home working, which was dreadful. Let's just be quite frank. What we were all doing was we were balancing working from home with remote schooling of our children. And the schools at that point hadn't actually caught up or got decent systems in place. And it was stressful. We also could only leave home for very limited reasons. So, and a huge amount of the domestic burden of the pandemic did indeed fall on women. But look closer at the data. There was a very interesting report published by the University of Plymouth called the Parenting in the Pandemic Study. And there was a further one, I think it was called Time with Dad, which was done by the UK's Fatherhood Institute. Now, sure, if you plotted it on a graph, you'd see the amount of domestic work done by women increased during the pandemic. But it did also for men. And the interesting thing is that when you removed the commute from a man's day, he tended to spend that time with the children. Okay. So what's going to happen? Well, unfortunately, in the UK, we have a government that is just intent on going back to the old ways. most employers are not actually playing ball with this, and most employers seem to have cottoned on that if they want to retain the talent, they've got to stay flexible. It's very just to give you a comparison, it's very interesting that in the UK, the government is intent on trying to force people back to the workplace, whereas in the Republic of Ireland, the government is doing all it can to roll out super fast broadband because it sees home working as a way to regenerate rural communities that have been left on the back burner for years. So it's just interesting to see the different approaches. Now, what's actually happening, or that I think is happening, and I'm basing this anecdotally, what we're seeing being introduced is hybrid working. So in reality, what we're seeing is people maybe being at home 2 or 3 days a week, or out there in the workplace 2 or 3 days a week. It's a logical step, and I can see why we're going that way, because employers don't quite want to give up the workplace, and some employees don't quite want to give up the workplace either. I'm personally not a huge fan of hybrid because it's not truly remote. It's not truly flexible. Okay. Especially those employers who are saying, right, you can work at home Monday and Friday, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you must be in the workplace. That's not really flexible working. That's actually very rigid working. But Rome was not built in a day. To expect this change to come about overnight to true flexible remote working, a bit unrealistic to expect that to happen. So I'm cautiously welcoming the hybrid approach, because I think it is a huge step towards genuine flexibility. But I think what we have seen is, I don't know, 5, 6, maybe even a decade's worth of advances in the workplace have come, bam, they've happened in 18 months. So we've definitely seen a huge positive change, but there's still more to do.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And yeah, especially in my mind, like part-time careers and job sharing and top sharing, as you know, these I'm very passionate about. Now, is there anything, John, that you would like to share with our audience that you feel we haven't covered yet?
Um, no, I think I'm okay. I know you did ask me to prepare a few it's possible sentences. If you
Yes,
want me to, I
please.
can fire away.
Yes, please.
Okay. So first one's a little bit longer than I intended it to be, but I've made this point already. It's possible to retrain and re-qualify in later life. Now, I've spoken about the fact that I'm presently, distance learning with the Open University in the UK, but I've actually, during the first lockdown, I started studying for GCSE maths, which is the standard mathematics qualification taken at high school. This is a qualification I did not pass at high school. It didn't hold me back as a journalist, but if I was going to go into education, it's a qualification that I had to get. Now, I didn't pass it first time. I had to resit it a couple of times, but I did actually get that GCSE maths in the end. And of course, I'm now gone back to higher education as well. So it's possible to retrain and requalify later in life. So it's possible, and it must be embraced in our society, that a father can take the lead on caregiving and can be a beautiful and talented caregiver. And I'm just going to summarize that very shortly in one more sentence, that it's possible to be a man and to be a caregiver.
Wow. This is such a perfect finishing of our conversation to summarize it, so well in your it's possible statements. Thank you so much, John, for being my guest today.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me on. Just remember, people, it's possible. And my love to Canada, a country I love a great deal.
Thank you. And now, how can people find you on social media, John?
Yes. Okay. So LinkedIn, you'll find me as John Adams Dad Blog UK. Dad Blog UK is one word. You will find me on all the main social media channels, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as at Dad Blog UK. You will find me on. Oh, you actually find my blog itself. Is dadbloguk.com.
Great. And what I will also do when we create a podcast episode out of our conversation, I will be sure to put in the show notes all of the links so people can, find you on social media. And thank you so much again for being my guest, John.
No, thank you again, Karen. This is great to speak to you.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. We hope you gained valuable insights and new ideas. To keep listening to future episodes, please head over to iTunes or your favorite player and subscribe and give it a rating. We would very much appreciate a review and for you to share it on social media, so more people can start innovating in how they offer employment. Until the next time, goodbye!